Hey, Microsoft 365 Nation, Harry Brelsford, and we're going around the horn again. It's our monthly conversation with our contributors, and we have the illustrious Ken Dwight from Houston, Texas back. Sir, before we get going, let's take a few, we like to have fun here in our community. So let's talk about what you're going to go do next week. That was fascinating, and I think our viewers might like that story.
Well, that definitely falls in the category of fun. My passion for the last 50 years has been flying. And so the convention I go to every year in Oshkosh, Wisconsin, and that's coming up next week. Yep. So I'll be flying from Houston to Oshkosh in a little airplane and spend a week there and then fly home.
Yeah, and you were saying it's thousands of planes and even more, hundreds of thousands of people. I mean, what's the story, man?
Well, every pilot knows about Oshkosh, and every pilot has either been to Oshkosh or wants to go to Oshkosh. And so this is my 49th year in a row of going. So I've got a serious case of the Oshkosh disease.
Yeah, no kidding. That looks fun. And finally, you said that there's like Boeing will have a presence there, and so I mean it's the real deal.
Yeah, it's everything from the military contractors to it started off with the home built airplanes. And right. So they built an airplane in the garage, and that was back in 1953. They had the first convention, and it's grown and evolved since then. And now they have over 600,000 people that show up from usually something over 60 countries. And next week, the Oshkosh Tower will do about 6 times the number of takeoffs and landings that O'Hare does.
Man, well, all right. Well, have fun and man, take a couple pics. But hey, this month, is I was saying earlier offline, but it's here we sit on a summer Friday. It's almost fishing season. The fish are starting to roll in the Pacific Northwest, and so let's just have a chat. And I'm kind of reading a little bit more about malware attacks and security attacks on mobile phones, and here's a piece on the smart TV and so on. Are you hearing the same thing, and have you gotten questions like with mobile phones in your workshops? Have you had those questions before?
I've had those questions, but usually from a theoretical perspective. Nobody that's been in any of my workshops has had firsthand experience with a phone actually being hacked or getting malware. It happens, and the threats are out there. And of course, as you know, a phone is a computer, and it's got some of the same vulnerabilities and things that could happen. But frankly, there's not much economic incentive for the bad guys to do that for most people today. And the only cases that I've heard about that have actually happened in the real world have been people that work for a big company. They have a company issued telephone that's got all of their corporate documents and access to the corporate network, and that's an attractive target for the hackers. But that's an environment I don't play in very much. So I hear the stories, read the articles, but again, nobody in my workshops has had that experience firsthand or even secondhand. They've asked about it, and it's not something I cover in the workshops generally.
Yeah, and the devices, the IoT devices, again, my experience is a little bit similar along those lines that, I'm hearing theoretically you can penetrate the IoT devices and take over the sensors and so on. These are early days, right? This is an emerging conversation, and I would suspect in your community, you're going to start to get more questions over the next 12, 24, 36 months. I mean, that would make sense that it's going to become a conversation. If we're guilty of anything at the nation, SMB, M365, sometimes we're a little bit out front in some of the conversations. We had a 5G webinar back in the spring. And Ken, that's okay. I'd rather be early than late. But what that results in is it results in some very basic discovery conversations. And then in a few years, of course, it all makes sense.
And also along the line of IoT in general, there are a couple of well-known attacks that have happened that way. In fact, a famous story I've heard from multiple sources is about the penetration in Vegas that actually the entry point was the smart fish tank. The regulator that put the bubbles into the water in the aquarium or whatever was actually what got hacked to get into that corporate network.
That's interesting. Yeah, let me grab what you're pitching, and I will be at the CompTIA ChannelCon show in early August, their annual convention for CompTIA members, and that's at the Bellagio in Vegas. And what's interesting is on one of the days, I think it's the third day, they had a tour of the technology behind the Bellagio fountain system. And it's gorgeous, right? The ballet of the water and the music, and it quickly filled up, right? By the time I saw it, it said sign here for the waiting list. But Ken, to your point, I'll see what I can do to either talk to people who went on that or go to it myself. To your point, that's some of the vulnerabilities, right? That we have these entry points. Imagine, the Bellagio water fountain is how the hackers got in, right?
Well, and there was another a major distributed denial of service that was done mostly through webcams, hacked webcams, and that hundreds of thousands of webcams all pinging the same IP address at the same time. And I don't remember the site that was involved, and that goes back a year or two, so it's not real recent, but it is an IoT entry point to the whole network.
Yep. Well, I'll tell you what, let's call it good. Let's all go flying and fishing. I guess I'd call it fly fishing. And thank you, sir. We'll talk to you in truly the dog days of summer in August. But thank you very much, Jenny. Thanks for your help in the radio control room. And folks, have a great day. And thanks for participating in the Microsoft 365 Nation community.